Okay, so to start with, we're going to talk about how Marlee's Tobii has helped her access learning and fun, but we are no experts. We've experimented with sort of advice of experts. We've played. We've had a really good go at it. So it's through these photos you'll see our learning journey. So we didn't get best practice right. Sometimes we booted best practice to the side for a bit, and I must admit that we end up coming back there. But today we're proud to share our Tobii story because it's given all of us so much joy and Marlee such a much higher quality of life. My name's Beck. This is Marlee. Marlee lives with Rett syndrome. And for those not familiar with Rett syndrome, amongst other symptoms, it stole the use of her hands. It affects most of her gross motor control. It causes her to have dyskinesia, dystonia, which is all this movement. And I was very pleased that her neurologist spoke to me about when her mouth starts going and everything, it's because she intended to do something. So I wait for the cue when that has passed. So Marlee faces loads of challenges, and another little symptom, and it's not little, is apraxia. So it can be quite difficult for Marlee in this kind of setting to participate, but if she wants to, she can at any time, and she can comment along the way, and in the past she's done that to me in television interviews to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I think I gave a theory about something. I think girls with Rett do this. And Marlee said, that's silly. And everybody had a little giggle, and I loved it. I must add that in preparing for this presentation, Marlee's asked me to include lots of information, and I had to change the presentation, but her stuff was much better for you guys. So we've done that, and the very first thing she said she wanted to share was that she's intelligent, and that she is, and I'm very proud of her. So let's get started. So the first step, I guess, of our journey to get everyone to embrace her AAC devices and her pod book, which is dangling off the front of the mount, was winning her carers, her teachers and other people over. And Marlee did that. That was nothing to do with me. I set things in place. We had pre-meetings. I'm sure they looked at me like I was a nutter because I'm saying she can do this and this, and this is her talker and this is her... They'd never seen a Tobii before. They said they were familiar with pods, but the pod book that they did have wasn't a, I'm going to say, true pod book. It had been customised so much that it had lost its flow. In fact, it didn't have turn the pages in lots of places. So when they saw Marlee's book, they said, oh, actually... And so we did a little bit of training around that. So I guess the first point I wanted to make is her Tobii i12 is robust. It allowed her to take it on trial to daycare, to kindy, with all the kids running around. And at that time, we didn't have this mount. In fact, we still don't have this mount. This is our trial mount, because Marlee's just got a new chair, and for the first time, we can have one attached to a chair. But she had the tabletop mount, so it could have got knocked off a table, anything. But we just decided if she was going to communicate, she had to have something she could use anywhere, all of the time. And while she had her low-tech pod, and she'd had that since she was 3, so she started with the Tobii when she was 3.5, so we've had it for about 4 years. While she had her pod book, she was relying on her communication partner. She was relying on them to understand her yes, her no, and they were all developing. And I must say, once she started at pre-primary, her yes and no's improved, and I think that was more about her communication partners missing her subtle cues that maybe I would have picked up. And so the Tobii gave her an independent form of communication, where apraxia is still affected, because she may want to stare at that cell and she stares at that one, but she has the ability to delete the word, and she does that. So if it's not the word she wanted, she will quickly delete it and say the one that she did want. And I can't say I necessarily taught her how to do that. She just understands the delete word function because I modelled it, but she uses it when she needs it. So just a few examples of how she won people over. So in the daycare setting with the trial device, Marlee's carer, Lauren, from the toddler room, Marlee was moved up to a pre-kindy room and started with a new carer named Katie. At the same time, Lauren was moved down to the baby room in the centre. And Lauren was so upset that she didn't get to have the Tobii in her room that after a few days of hearing everyone talking about it, she decided she was going in her lunch break to the pre-kindy room. And she walked in the door and Marlee was sitting at the desk with the Tobii in front of her. And she turned straight back to her Tobii and she said, "I'm asking a question. Where is people Maddie?" which is Marlee's younger sister, who is 5, and Lauren was Maddie's carer in the baby room at the time. And Lauren said, "Okay, I can see you can use that and I'm out of here." And they said, "Oh my God, what have we underestimated?" So then they started involving that Tobii in the everyday functions, and when they were doing activities, the kids got to just go and pick what activity they wanted to do. So they opened the activity page and they asked Marlee what she wanted to do. And one day she picked dolls and they asked her what she wanted to do with the dolls, and she said wash them. So they got a big tub of water out and they put the doll in it, and then some kids bought soap and some kids bought face washers, and they modelled all that language. And they said within 15 minutes they had every child around this tub and they washed every doll in the daycare centre all together and had huge amounts of fun. Then when we started at kindy, brand new school, no one knew her. As I said, we had the pre-meetings, we did the same sort of exercise. I remember in Marlee's IEP meeting in week 2 or 3 of school, everyone told us how she was having such a good time. She was so clever, she's got such a beautiful smile. And John and I were like, yes, yes. And then I'll love her kindy teacher forever, because she said, "I don't agree with any of you." And I went, "Oh," because I dropped Marlee to school and she was happy to come. I picked Marlee up from school and she was happy to come. She said, "I don't think she's happy at all. She complains, she does whatever." And I thought, oh, that's really odd. And she couldn't make the sound, so I said, "How about I come in tomorrow and I'll just sit at the back of the room. You guys do what you do and I'll observe. You tell me when you hear it." So they were doing their math session for the day. I can't remember if they were learning about a letter yet. I think they were reading a story. And Marlee just started verbalising like, "Ah." And I said, "Is that the noise?" And he just interrupted things. "Is that the noise?" The teacher said, "Yes, that's it." And I said, "She's trying to tell you something." And because her aides didn't know the Tobii, the pod, they couldn't scaffold her to pages that would open and things like that, she didn't know how to get herself there. And I think the exercise was an alphabet activity. So we suddenly realised we needed a way for Marlee to be able to communicate about the topic that was happening. Like if anyone saw Gail, just the previous talk, that's what Gail was talking about. So the teachers, by the end of that day, gave me every alphabet worksheet they were going to be doing for that term. The associated worksheet talked about the book, but we decided we'd just start small and work at it. And then we had this exercise a week or so later where the kids were talking about me. The topic was on them, how they've changed to make them feel more independent. And it was when I was a baby I could, and all the kids are yelling out. I wore nappies, I could hold my bottle, I could, do all these things. Now I'm a schoolgirl, I can, and I've just realised I'm on the wrong slides again. Now I'm a schoolgirl, I can. So they all said I can take myself to the toilet, I can feed myself, I don't need any help, I don't know whatever. And the teacher's sinking in her chair, Marlee's sinking on the floor. I ran across the room and I sat down on the Tobii, and I think I went to things, equipment, and before I even found the word myself, Marlee said computer. The teacher said, "Yes, you can drive a computer better than I can." And all the kids just went on about what she could do, and they were just, again, amazed at how she could solve it. We then did the last part of the exercise, "When I'm a teenager, I will," at home, and I modelled some stuff she might like to talk about, and Marlee independently took herself to that she wanted to be a drummer. And so we had a lot of chat for 40 minutes over drumming, and in that chat, it was so funny, I've never laughed so much in my life. We had a hoot, and I filmed the whole thing, so if anyone ever wants to see it, you're welcome. And she said she wants to be a drummer with a CD, and I said, I established that it was her CD, she was going to record it. And then I said, who's going to listen to it? And she said, everybody. And I can vouch for the fact that Marlee loves drumming. So that's that part of the journey. I'm just going to flick slides again. Okay, so as I discussed, knowing where to find the words she needed was problematic. It was one of the challenges she faced, even though she had an independent form of communication. The speed of the classroom was a challenge because it all happened so fast, and someone who was learning to navigate couldn't get to the topics of the word as quickly when they came up. The pod pages were new, as I said. Scaffolding efficiently and effectively just wasn't happening at the time. 3 years down the track, I can say that it does. We needed to create an opportunity for her to communicate her understanding fast, independently during class learning sessions. So these were the alphabet activity sheets that the kids were doing, and they were instructed to look at the pictures in the letter B that they'd been focusing on in the math session, think of if the first letter sound was B, obviously, and then colour in the ones that they thought started with a B. So what I did was I went home and I went into, there was a lot of discussion about it, but I went into activities and I basically created an LED in the activity page, which just is a page of cells with the same symbols, well, as close as I could get, in them with no words. And we just gave Marlee the same instruction to look at the picture, say the words in her head, and pick the ones off the Tobii that started with the letter B, and she did. Whilst they were reading the book about the letter B, they also added the words that came up in the book in case she wanted to use them, or any that were called out during the math session that weren't on the page already. And there was right and wrong answers on that page. There was words that didn't start, or symbols that didn't start with the letter. And then, as you can see, that's what she's done there. And that red note says that she used her Tobii to do it, and that she also chose the word ballerina. Then, when it came to doing the trace the letter thing, they traced the letter in the air with her, but speaking about its shape. And then they did hand over hand tracing. And then from that same activity page, they asked Marlee what she might like to draw, and then with the Tobii or some colour selection sheets, she chose the colour, and that's how they established a pattern over time. We were very mindful, though, that when we created that activity page, we weren't removing the modelling of those words in the rest of her pod pages, so she knew how to find it at another time. So whenever the book was being read, the words were modelled through the page set rather than through the activity page. And I'll go on more about that later. So basically I learnt to create the pages and included the blank cells. The further up in her pod layouts that we've gone, there are the topics and the story pages, and it's all built in. We had, at the same time, we also introduced speech therapy sessions that John and I paid for to support her teachers, aides and peers. And in those sessions, Yvette is our speech therapist down here, they did predictive chart writing, shared reading sessions, just involving the kids in modelling the pod book and things like that. I think Marlee might have something to say, given the... I'll just give her a bit of time and I'll flick to the next slide, because the next slide's on the same topic. When it came to reading, I developed an index of words and pathways so that her aides could look at that list. So if the teacher had given me the class book in advance, she could look at the list and say where to find, different words under different categories, and that helped them to learn the system. And I also got feedback from Marlee using words that I knew I'd put on those sheets that I hadn't ever modelled to her, and she would do it at home. So I know that that kind of thing worked. And we still do that. So the balancing act part was about making sure we were still upskilling people while we were providing an easier solution. The cheat sheets, and I certainly did not create an activity page or topic page every time I was asked. We had a discussion about why it was needed, how I thought we could get around it. I would discuss with the vet what did we think was the best solution to the problem, and we came up with whatever the strategy was. The picture before was Marlee doing predictive chart writing, and this is one of the first lessons that Marlee's teacher ran in predictive chart writing. So Vet had done 2 or 3 sessions with her and guided her, and then this was the one that Alessia or Miss Erdy did off her own back. And obviously, Yvette, I remember at the end of the day, I got a text message from Yvette going, "How did they go today?" And I said, "I don't know, but I got this photo." But I did know, and Alessia said she worked so hard helping me to run the session, she was exhausted by the time we got to the next part after everyone had made their choice. And that she was literally sitting up and she just went like that and she was asleep. And she slept like that for an hour. They put a cushion under her head, they didn't leave her. So I guess the point there is it can be exhausting. But Marlee will bounce back. So she may have slept for 10 minutes and then she'll be back into it. And a lot of people make the mistake of removing her so she can have rest time and do whatever else. And it's not that. She just needs a recharge, a reboot, and she's back into it. Anyone seeing her dancing last night on the dance floor would have noticed that. I sat her down because her thigh muscles were shaking. I could feel them twitching under my hands. And 5 minutes later, she was trying to stand up again. And so we just did cycles of that. She needed multiple methods to communicate to get her to engage. So the Tobii was instrumental because we could always have it clamped on the back of the table in the background. It was there for her to use if someone wasn't scanning, if her body wasn't her friend, she could use her low-tech pod because that was there. She also had simple choice making or segmenting arrangements to use. Do you want to say your line, Marlee? Is that what you're telling Amy? Would you like Amy to help you? Yes.
Did you press the message window?
One more. Present, 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 present.
So we've been talking about that Marlee wants to present. Oh, Mum.
You can. You tell me what you want to present. I'll keep talking though because we've got a limited amount of time, but whenever you say something, I'll just change tack to what you're talking about, okay? Or do you want to stand up here sit next to me up here? I just asked her 2 questions at once, so you can all critique me. Would you like to come up the front? I'm just going to help you for a sec because you've got stuck. Okay, I'm going to ask you again. Would you like to come up the front? Yes. It's a very tired yes. So we'll just move you. And you can talk. I'm just going to turn you so you can still see the pictures, okay? Yeah, is that okay? Yeah? We'll see how we go there. So as you can see in the picture, she's got her multiple methods, and I assume she bought in and engaged because she could choose whichever method was going to suit her at that any given time. I love this mount on the chair because her pod book is now in front of her because Marlee does stare at her pod book. I need a better system. I haven't worked that out yet. But I can see her looking down at it, so I know she wants to use low-tech over high-tech. I've said all that. Via utilisation of Windows control on the Tobii, she was able to access Starfall, which the other kids were doing on the Spark board at school. And that really gave a lot of power to her lesson, so she felt quite involved. Even though at the beginning she wanted to use the smart board like everyone else and stand at it. She couldn't reach high enough, and it was hard for her to hold on to something to tap. Her friends wanted to use her device that was next to them on the floor, and the teacher had to keep asking them to look at the big screen. So it gave her device power. We've been there. This is some more pictures. Marlee doing writing. She's got the low-tech alphabet. She also had the high-tech alphabet. In this picture, it looks like the number page because it was a bit further along after they'd done the writing. But you can see that, and she was writing about the picture that she'd done in the morning. That's not what she wrote. What she wrote was UK, I think, IUK, and it was about her mummy and that F word. Because I had forgotten her vent pipe. Marlee's peg-fed, and she swallows air and she needs to be vented. So I had forgotten that. I'd gone back home and then left the other part of it behind. So I went to school twice in about half an hour. So she didn't write about her clown, she wrote about her mum. And then the maths, doing maths there with this year. Everyone's effort paid off, so they all were passionate, they all wanted to hear more from Marlee, they believed in her, they no longer needed convincing. And a major sponsor for the fun run that's held in Perth that Marlee enters every year asked if they could run a story last year on her, and the slogan they used for Marlee's banner was, "I choose to inspire," and they asked and I said, yes, you can do the story, but you have to come to school and show her using her communication device, because the people that we do the Run for a Reason for and raise money for are the RET research team at Telethon Kids Institute, and they helped us to find our way on the journey. And so this is just a little snippet of that production that they did.
Because Marlee could talk, and then she lost the ability to talk. And they have epilepsy, they have the breathing issues, which can then extend into pneumonia and things like that they don't overcome. It's very important for us to have a high quality of life all of the time and be a part of as much as possible and share as many life experiences. And the flip side to that is that the more Marlee experiences, the more she has to talk about, so the more motivating her communication devices are. And as parents, obviously we're not with our kids forever, so we like to know that she's going to have a method of communicating her needs if at a point in time she's here on her own.
And just to let everyone know, Marlee knows that means when she's living on her own. And we've got a method. I'm just going to show you, excuse me. Do you need this, Marlee? Do you need your vent pipe? Yes? No? No. Okay. It's just there if you do. Okay, so, sorry. Marlee's Tobii has enabled her to say what she wants to say when she wants to say it. All the language is there. She clearly talks about things that she wants to talk about. She's been able to draw with it. She's been able to select music via an MP3 player with it. She's played musical instruments and been involved in school concerts. She's learnt, and she's also demonstrated her progression in her learning because of it. And she's had fun. And ultimately, last year it saved her life, and we're going to go into each of those points now. So freedom to communicate. An example, last year, mid-morning on her sister Maddie's 4th birthday, Marlee used her Tobii to share this message, my birthday prize bird. And I said to her, "Are you telling me what you want for your birthday present?" And she shrieked, she said yes, and she turned to me and looked at me. And I said, "Oh, that's a very clever thing to do." She did get her bird. Her birthday's 2.5 months later. But what she did in between in that 2.5 months, whenever birthday came up or present came up, she told us that same story. So she just made sure it was going to happen. When she got her bird, she used an alphabet flip chart. She had moved on from the flip chart just to the single page alphabet because she preferred choosing columns like she scans their pod. and she named her bird. We also used a billy pad because the name was quite unusual, and I just wanted to make sure that was what she wanted to call her bird. And a billy pad, when you put the letters in, it obviously sounds them out and it connects the letters together. And we also use the Tobii keyboard to do the same. And in the end, you can all meet Orlo, which is O-R-L-O. And Orlo, Marlee calls her baby pet when she talks about him. And Marlee asked to include Orlo in here and the HBF Run for a Reason slide as well. This is a second example which happened last year at Agoski. And for any people with young kids in the room, you're already doing it, you're here. But I underestimated the power that Marlee going to Agoski would have on her use of her communication device. It may not have happened right then and there when people spoke to her, but her desire to do it was just enhanced beyond a new level. And in yesterday's presentation, she said something to a vet which was personal, so it didn't get shared, that I've never seen her do. So I was very impressed. So this is, I was greeted in the Agoski conference foyer by a really, really desperate Marlee trying to get out of her chair to get to the Tobii that I was holding on to. And we had the floor mount still. And you had to put the floor mount on a table of the right height for her to access it from the wheelchair. So I got her out, sat her on the ground right where she was, put the Tobii on, turned it on. And that is what Marlee typed in a matter of minutes. And so you can all just have a read. And as it turned out, Marlee had been to a presentation the day before, much like we're doing, but the little girl wasn't present. And her mum was talking about being able to go to a mainstream school and it all was possible, and all the photos were of in the playground, and that she had videos of her playing with her peers and then modelling her pod and doing things like that. And then my sister, who was her support person, had taken her to the zoo that morning. When they were coming back into the hotel foyer, only moments before this, that lady was going out shopping, and she said, "Oh, where have you been, Marlee?" And she had no way of communicating. I had the Tobii. They didn't have the pod book with them. And Marlee just smiled and looked at her. She had a stuffed giraffe. And the lady goes, "Well, I think you might have been to the zoo." And my sister said yes. And then she said, "You know what? Where I live, you can go with your families and you can feed the giraffes carrots. But before you can do that, you have to clean up all the poo with a broom." And so that was the message. So this came out. And when we got to Dustpan, I went, "I can't say I've ever been to that page. We would never have talked on it. I can't imagine school has." I turned to my sister and I said, "Any significance to the dustpan?" She said, "Oh, yeah." And she told me about that story downstairs. So at that moment, Marlee was on 15 plus at the time in her pod layout, as you can see. And Yvette and I had been talking about trying the 60. We masked up a 60. We just hadn't introduced it. And she said she's ready. And we put it on and she spoke for another 20 minutes with lots of laughter, and she hasn't turned back. And she's got more language available to her now, and she uses it. So, including past tensing. At school at the moment, her class is doing contractions, and I get apostrophe RE or apostrophe S on all sorts of words with past tense, even words that can't be, to set context, I think, is why it's happening. And then a couple of months later, we happened to go on a family holiday, and I read a brochure, and there was a zoo that you could feed the giraffes, and we went, and you can only imagine the level of excitement. The drawing, there's multitudes of drawing packages available via the Tobii with web-based programs and things like that. We've tried different ones. She's been able to draw letters of a name, draw a rainbow, do other free drawing related to school, and then they've printed it out and put that as her picture of a frog or her picture of whatever. I must admit, I held her back from using the drawing packages because I can't work them with my eyes. And then I read that post on I think it was on the Tobii Dynavox community or one of the communication literacy pages on Facebook, and I thought Marlee was in hospital, she just had her peg inserted, we had some downtime. I thought I'm just going to try something different than watching a video, and I put it on and she did that first drawing, and I said, Marlee Watson, have you just done an M like the first letter of your name? Can you do that again for Daddy? And I got my phone out and I videoed it, and it was like 30 seconds later, and this is what she did. So same shape, I took that back to school, said, look at this, so excited. So next time they wrote her name, they used, that's Look to Learn graffiti package. They used that, and Marlee wrote an M, an A, an R, and an E, and they actually think the L was there, but when you move in graffiti, it draws a line wherever you are. And so by the time the exercise had finished, it was all covered up, it was just a big splodge. And the teacher's going to me, she did it, I promise, she did. I'm not making it up, she did it. I just didn't have time because it was so quick to take photos on the way. And I so wish we had Gaze Viewer turned on. We had it, and it would have recorded the plot. It doesn't matter, she did it. Just can't show you. The access to music and concerts via the Tobii, you can access web-based free music apps. There's Look to Learn Sights and Sounds. Marlee loves that drum kit. It's given her the ability to be involved, jam with her dad, and her sister. I'm not allowed to show the video of the family jam sessions because Dad doesn't think he's a great singer of Frozen, but he fumbles through the words looking at his iPad. She loves being the DJ in Communicator. You can put an MP3 player in and she selects songs and everyone dances, and then she waits till the end. She's not like my friends who change the song because they don't like it or whatever. So yes, and this is just a little video coming up next of Marlee's in a mainstream Catholic school in Perth, and she's in a mainstream class, but there is also an inclusive setting within it called the Sienna Centre, and if kids need extra support for literacy or numeracy, they can go to that classroom for those blocks, and then they're with their peers for the rest of the day. Up until this year, Marlee has just been in the mainstream class with her aides, and the Sienna teacher visits her in there for certain subjects. She's a great model. We're just having a bit of a challenge off it this year, and Marlee's only doing one day at the moment in the mainstream class for literacy out of the 5. We're hoping to step that up to 2 or 3 next term, because I think I've proven my point, but we'll just keep working through the process. So this is a snapshot of Marlee and her Sienna peers performing a concert at the end of the year to the rest of the school, and they then do that same concert in repeat 2 days later to the parents, and it's like the graduation ceremony for that Sienna child. They still participate in the full graduation ceremony, but it's a very intimate, lovely setting. And they do dances. Marlee danced in her wheelchair, in her walker. They did a drumming song, which is this one, and Marlee plays the Tobii drum kit, and you'll hear the rolling sound. But I just wanted to show you a little snippet of that. Oh. You heard that? So then this is her music class. That's what the drums kit screen looks like. And then this is just a family jam session when she played the djembe drum. I used to hold her elbow. She would open and close her hand to change the noise. But I've got no rhythm, so I interfered with her drumming to the beat. So she does prefer to play the other drum kit. This is another demonstration of learning. This is Gaze Viewer in action. This is a Communicator book that you can download if you have Communicator. And when I first recorded Marlee watching a narrated video of a book, she picture walked through the book. So that was a couple of years ago. And I just recorded this about 3 or 4 weeks ago. You can see how her... Sorry.
Today I will fly. Today I will fly.
I've made it as loud as I can.
Today I will fly. We've got some characters. Read it to me.
Okay. Today I will fly. Let's turn the page. It's English.
So it's hard to hear, but in this slide I'm saying, can you see what's in the elephant speech box? Do you know what the word is in the elephant speech box? Trying to get her just to look there, even. And she didn't look there. She looked at the no symbol, which I thought was rather clever. Probably don't tell me what to say. And then I pushed it, so that's the red box. A bit later in this book, she actually read the sentence backwards via the symbols up the right-hand side, which I thought was rather interesting. They're not her symbols either. They're obviously different symbols, but that doesn't seem to bother Marlee. Did I just go one too many? This screenshot is of Marlee doing spelling. So I'm just looking up something because of the message Marlee's left me there. They do spelling with Marlee. She does the Year 2 Soundwaves book, which is like a curriculum book. They were getting her to spell 5 list words from the top. And what they had been doing was showing a flashcard, then verbalising the word, putting it in a sentence, and then giving her some scrambled letters as well as the full alphabet on the Tobii to rearrange spell the word, or she could type it on the Tobii. And the teacher held up the word gate but didn't announce it, and then Marlee started using the predictive text keyboard and wrote, "I am going through and giggled her little head off. So the teacher said, "Okay, spell it," and she did. So that was just really cool. We've had fun by exploring voice-activated toys like Dee Dee the Dragon, Zimmy the Dog, as well as Edison robots. More recently, we've had some fun with Google Home, and I can see so much potential with Google Home in building sentences to quiz Google. When you see these examples, I had, thinking it might be a little bit harder to do, created an activity page with some colours on it, and I had done one with some songs on it, made the squares bigger so Apraxia wouldn't be such a problem, so she could have some fun. And then her sister starts asking Google,
Google dot, turn the lights to green.
Sure, changing Hugo 1 to green.
That's just one example of what Google can do, but her sister started asking Google, what sound does a fart make? All of this. Marlee's face lights up, and I thought, I've got to go back to Gail's topic page and just fill that in with an OK Google, and we'll just start asking her. Sorry, I talked through that. Don't know if I can go back. She asked Google to play a certain song. The song came on, and I just loved the reaction of her sister. Now the crucial moment. Last year Marlee had some episodes. We weren't sure quite what they were, but she would be like this 1 minute and then just stop breathing to the point she went a little bit blue, and over 6 weeks it progressed into holding breath for longer than 3 minutes, CPR intervention, and she'd come round, have a sleep for an hour, and we'd do it again. So during one of the earlier episodes, John had said to her, just remember to breathe, Marlee, just remember to breathe. Breathe, darling, breathe. And she came out of it, her Tobii was in front of her, and she said, understand, can't, which we went, So then we thought, maybe it's dystonia and it's affecting her airways, and spoke to the doctors. We went to EDs, and because she was normal, everyone sent us home with another little bit of a drug boost or whatever. And in the last 2 weeks, that all escalated, but we'd had weeks and weeks of slides like this. So breathe better, breathe gross, check up, fever, runny nose, blocked nose. Now the runny nose, blocked nose, she kept saying runny nose, and I waited 2 days when these messages first started for the cold to start, it all sounded like a cold. No runny nose happened. And then I realised there was no blocked nose on the device. So I added blocked nose, and blocked nose stayed. She would say she was nauseous, she would say whatever, and it went on, and then school started to report back to me that it was happening, and I started to get very nervous. And then these pages came up. So we talked a lot about, she goes to a Catholic school, talked about God and needing to go and see God and needing to go and see the priest and get help, which is all very great communication. And we did go to church, and we did do what she wanted us to do. And in the end, as I said, the seizures got worse and worse. They did an emergency EEG and found nothing. It was the best EEG she'd ever had. The neurologist came to me. Marlee had just had a major episode and was in resus. And the doctor said to me, I don't know, doesn't show anything, should just be a mush because she's had so many of those episodes. And I said, well, this is what she's been saying. And I showed him all photo snapshots of all those screens. Do you think she's understanding? Yes, I do think she is at the beginning, he said, from the video footage that you show me of them, from the communication. I don't find it funny, she is, because she thinks she's clever, and she is very clever. So he said, I know that she's breathing in because she's lasting so long before she goes blue. She's not breathing out. There's no voluntary movement. I don't think her brainstem's talking to her. The CPR is just stimulating her brainstem. He said, what do you know about drugs on the market? I shared a couple of ideas. He said, I'm going away to think. And he said, I'm apologising that I have to go away and think, but I do. He looked at all those slides because he took copies of them, and he came back to us and he said, I think she might have a problem with her serotonin receptors. Either there's a faulty one, for some reason she's not getting enough. We know girls with Rett have problems with serotonin levels. Let's put her on Prozac and see what happens, because that increases your serotonin level, and she has not had one since. Now, I don't want to think about what might have happened without all these screens, but just shows you the power of needing to have communication, and Marlee used it. So that would have to have been the moment I would think she would not say anything, but she did. So like Marlee, her Tobii i12 is robust, it's inspiring, it's motivating, and has the versatility to match her ingenuity. And we're all done, except Marlee's got a message here, which is mixed with the other message. But would you like me to play it? Or do you just want me to share the story? Yes. So what she's written is Mother's Day happy, and that's what I've been looking for, is my Mother's Day card this year, because Marlee wrote her message to me on her Tobii, and it says that I'm excellent, and that she loves me, and she wrote love Marlee, hand over hand, but she'd chosen to write that using her Tobii. Is that what you wanted to share? Yes. Thank you. I love you too.